There's something to be said about being a specialist at one particular thing. And when it comes to ships in Star Citizen, a specialist possesses a certain refinement in whatever it is they do. And that's certainly true about the ship featured in this review. It's a specialist. It does only one thing, but it does it extremely well. In this video, we're going to dive into what makes the Gladius from Aegis Dynamics so good, despite the fact that it can't be used in most areas of the game, and why you, if you're into high skill cap fighter play, might consider adding it to your fleet as a budget-friendly fighter. Welcome back to Forge Core Gaming. I'm your host Phoenix, and this is Aegis Gladius. Before we get into this review, I'd like to take a moment and ask that you hit that subscribe button if you enjoy Star Citizen content with a focus on quality. I publish 3 videos a week and have recently started live streaming, which I'll be doing more regularly once I work out my schedule in the coming weeks. We're still a new channel and are extremely appreciative of all the support and feedback that you, the viewers, have given us so far. Now without further ado, let's hop right in. If you've watched my reviews before, then you know I don't generally spend time doing tours. I think most of the viewers know what kinds of features these ships have, but if you'd like me to start doing more tours and feature reviews, just let me know in the comments below and I'll be sure to start doing that. With that said, even if I was to do tours, there isn't a whole lot to look at when it comes to the Gladius. To me, it's a bare bones, no frills fighter. It does have gun racks and external storage on the outside of the ship hull, but other than that, there aren't any amenities to speak of. It is, as I mentioned in the intro, a specialist. To get more specific, it's a light fighter that's designed to take on other ships ranging from light, medium, and even some heavy fighters, leaning on its maneuverability and speed to claim victory. As such, in this review, we're going to focus on its combat capabilities, starting off with the stats overview and comparison, after which we'll move into how well it flies, and then we'll finish it off by taking it into multiple combat scenarios including PU bounties, pirate swarm, and PvP combat against some of the verse's most formidable fighters, including the King of Kings, the F-8C Lightning. Now, starting off with stats, I selected 3 other ships to compare it to that you might consider being in the same weight class when it comes to combat capabilities. Those ships are the Anvil Arrow, the Asperia Talon, and the Aegis Avenger Titan. Here's the tale of the tape. When it comes to damage, the Gladius actually comes in dead last in DPS. Keep in mind, I normalized all of these damage outputs by using attritions across the board for everything. And as usual, we're going to ignore missile DPS given that missile performance is hit and miss, mostly miss, so it can't really be relied on. When it comes to shield HP, the Gladius moves up a bit into 2nd place while the Talon and Titan tie for 1st, leaving just the Arrow in 3rd place. When it comes to SCM speed, the Gladius falls behind again, coming in tied for 3rd place with the Talon at 225 meters per second, with the Anvil Arrow at 232 meters per second, and the Avenger Titan crushing the competition at 260 meters per second. We're going to skip over nav speeds as generally you won't be in nav mode while fighting, at least not until they bring quantum boost into the game. When it comes to maneuverability, the Gladius comes in tied for 2nd with identical pitch, yaw, and roll speeds as the Talon at 70, 52, and 200 degrees per second respectively, while the Arrow comes in an arguable 1st place of 74, 55, 189 degrees per second. I say arguable because that 11 degrees per second roll speed deficit for the Arrow is notable, but it does outperform when it comes to pitch and yaw. Moving down to hull HP, the Gladius again comes in last at 7,294 HP, which is less than half of the leader in this category, the Talon coming in at 18,730. Now let's talk dimensions. All of these ships are pretty small, but the Gladius sits right in the middle at 17.5 meters by 21 meters by 5.5 meters. And for all you dull fellows out there, that's about 97 bananas long. which doesn't sound terribly big, but keep in mind the newly released Guardian is only 16.3 meters or 91 bananas long. Take from that what you want. I'm not your real dad. Now, we can't take all of these specs at face value. On paper, the Gladius doesn't seem like much, especially when we compare it to other ships we have listed here. It seems super average, which I guess is a pretty good thing because every ship has to have competition. But because we can't take these stats at face value, I took this bad boy into free flight mode in an offline arena commander to see if it had any lungs. Spoiler alert, it does. Now, I don't generally fly ships with these kinds of movement stats, so I'm not an authority on the matter. And if you fall into the same camp, then you will be amazed at how well this thing handles. I'm not exaggerating when I say that I was able to push the envelope in the Gladius much further than I could with anything else in my fleet. Don't tell my Guardian. But this thing redefines what it means to have fun while piloting, at least for me. It's a good thing there's no co-pilot seat because I'd imagine there would be a near constant fighting over who gets to drive. And I'll explain a little bit more in detail. There were several times I thought I was going to crash while doing low altitude flying. I was purposely skirting along ground as I usually do in these tests. The only difference being that I wasn't crashing. Anytime I would get close to anything, I would just boost strafe in a different direction and the Gladius would just move out of the way almost instantly. To put it plainly, point the ship in a direction and it goes that direction. You don't really feel inertia in this ship, especially if you take some time to practice. And I'm not kidding when I say that I could take hairpin turns at max speed, boosting my way into the apex, pulling back on the throttle, coming to a nearly complete stop, and boosting back out of it in no time flat. This ship is just outrageous to fly. Now, are there other platforms out there that outperform this in maneuverability? Absolutely. The Arrow likely performs a little bit better, but we're not here to talk about the Arrow. Pay attention. All in all, I'd have to rate the maneuvering of this ship a solid 9 out of 10, and I'll never rate anything a 10 out of 10 because that's a rookie score and is objectively unattainable in my eyes. But maneuvering is only half the battle. And we already talked about how the Gladius had less than impressive DPS, but how does it actually perform in combat? Let's talk about it. Unfortunately, when I tried taking it out in the PU, the 4.0 live servers weren't cooperating, so I went into the 3.24 servers. I queued up a HRT and VHRT as the aim here was mostly to take it up against some larger ships to see how long it would take to bring them down. And I was surprised because it actually wasn't that long. Yes, the DPS is a bit low at 1476, but the fact that I could point the nose of this ship in any direction I wanted, whenever I wanted, meant my guns were on target most of the time. So my DPS was mostly limited by my magazine size, which was sufficient at 75 rounds per full charge. Keep in mind, my engines and shields weren't able to be maxed out if I wanted all 75 rounds, so just use that when passing judgment. In a PvP scenario, you would probably want to reallocate some of that energy to engines so that you can stay on boost more often. I do want to reiterate that this was in the 3.24 build of the game, and based on my experience in higher tier bounties in 4.0, the Gladius would almost certainly not fare as well if this test was done on the 4.0 build. And that's okay, I really don't think it should. It is a light fighter after all. Moving into Pirate Swarm, the primary purpose of the test was twofold. I wanted to see how quickly I could move through the waves, and I also wanted to see how many waves I could make it through before I couldn't advance any further. Just a quick note, I did switch to the 4.0 version of the game for Pirate Swarm as the server FPS is generally higher on 4.0, and I wanted as honest a challenge as I could get. Here's what I found. The early waves were, for the first time since I started doing Pirate Swarm as part of my ship reviews, the easiest part of this challenge. The Gladius had zero problem keeping up with the Reliance and other light fighters that came out during early phases. As a result, I was able to get through early phases faster than what I'm used to. The Cuddy Blacks were a little bit of a problem if they got the drop on me, but once I had them in my sights, it became a matter of staying out of their line of fire, which wasn't terribly difficult to do. It was the same story with the Corsair, though the size 3 shield did take a while to cut through. Once they were down, however, it did not take a tremendous amount of time to finish off the hull. But when the Hammerhead arrived, my progress came to a full stop. And this is where the combination of low shield and hull HP coupled with low DPS put me at too great a disadvantage to claim victory. Fact is, you're on a timer when it comes to fighting a crewed Hammerhead. With the Gladius, that timer is directly proportional to its ability to stay in boost. You see, when I was boost strafing, I was able to dodge most of what was coming my way, even still though I was taking some hits. But when I was out of boost, I was getting hammered by the quad-sized 4 turrets that seem to be really accurate when manned by AI these days. With that said, it only took a second or two of continuous fire to completely shred the hull of the Gladius. To put it plainly, I didn't stand a chance. Now that we sort of know the upper limit of the Gladius's capabilities in a PvE scenario, let's talk about PvP. An orgmate and I hopped into a custom free flight game so that we could fight each other. Our map of choice was Winter Circle, so we would be fighting in Atmo. Originally, the test was just supposed to be the Gladius versus the Guardian Key, but my friend has a F8C, so we decided to bring that into the mix as well. And to remove pilot bias, we would switch ships/pilots after each fight. Here's what we found. Against the Guardian, the Gladius actually stands a fair chance. When I was piloting the Gladius with very limited light fighter experience, I was able to take out the Guardian 50% of the time. And the play was to stay at distance using my small front-facing cross-section and high maneuvering speeds as an advantage. And I did this while I mixed in sporadic vertical and horizontal strafes to throw off my enemy's targeting, coupled with moving into close distances very rapidly and repositioning behind the Guardian as frequently as needed. Now, it did take several minutes to take down the Guardian, but I was able to do it. At the same time, if the Guardian got a beat on me, it was lights out pretty quickly. So if I slipped up and got complacent, I would get shot out of the sky almost immediately. It was the exact same story when I was piloting the Guardian. If I was able to get one full magazine on the Gladius, then it was pretty much game over. Things, however, took a severe turn when it came to the F8C. Fact of the matter is, the F8C has a lot of DPS and its guns cover a wide area, which made dodging the entirety of its volleys extremely difficult, and when those hits did land, they had impact. So much so that the confidence I had built up in the previous rounds against the Guardian all but vanished, and my strategy quickly turned from fight smart to run and hide, which didn't seem to work either. Now, I'm not saying it can't be done, as I'm almost certain there are fighter pilots out there that could have taken down the F8C, but if you're anywhere near being an average pilot, then this is a fight I would just avoid. Because, as the saying goes, if you're going to take a shot at the king, you had better not miss. And the F8 is just built different. Drop a comment if you'd like me to do a review on it in the coming weeks. So then, what do we think of the Aegis Gladius? Personally, I think it's top tier when it comes to being fun to fly. That's not something I always place a lot of value on, but there's definitely a time and place for it. I can also honestly say that, though there are practical limits to its capabilities in combat, there are still a lot of ships that you can go toe-to-toe with and come out on top. Additionally, a benefit of being a light fighter is that you can generally squeeze several of them into ships like the Polaris, but even if you don't plan on carrying one around, it might actually be a decent ship to get you around Pyro if your plan is to keep a low profile and avoid rather than engage. With its 1.3 SEU of quantum fuel, just be sure to plan your pit stops to resupply. Even if you do get into a fight with someone else, you'd actually have a pretty decent chance at winning the engagement if you practice enough. Remember, ships like this have a high skill cap, but that takes time behind the sticks, and really committing to becoming good at piloting it. My only gripe with it is that technically, it's outperformed by the Aegis Avenger Titan in over half of the metrics we discussed, and it doesn't have any cargo space or a logout bed. If I were being price conscious, I would say get the Avenger, which is cheaper and provides you with more options to play the game. But if you're looking for a dedicated fighter, i.e. you already have ships that fill multiple roles and you want a specialist, then the Aegis Gladius is a great budget option, coming in at $90 for the base model. But now that you know my thoughts on the Gladius, drop a comment and tell me yours. I'd love to hear from you. But with that, I think I'll end the video. As always, thank you all for watching. I hope all of you have a happy new year, and I'll see you in the verse.